Hello guys and welcome back to the show. In today's video, we are going to learn how to deploy a Flask and React application to Heroku. The first thing that we're going to do is to create a virtual environment. As you know, a virtual environment is like creating a world, and inside of the world, we put all the dependencies that we want inside of that world. You can even use Docker if you want, but I just want to make this very simple, so we are going to use a virtual environment. So what I'm going to do is to say that virtual env, that's p python 3 venv, like so. So now that I have the virtual environment installed, what I'm going to do is to activate my virtual environment. So I'll say source venv bin /activate. Okay, so I have the virtual environment activated now. The next thing that I'll do is to install Flask. So I'll do pip install, then I'll say Flask, like so. Now that I have Flask installed, the next thing I'm going to do is to create an app.py file. So I'll say touch app.py, then I'll open this in Visual Studio Code. Okay, this is going to be a simple Flask application. So I'll say from Flask, import Flask, like so. Then I'll create an app, which will be an instance of the Flask app. Then I'll pass it the __name_. Then I will come over here and I'll say that if __name_ is equal to the __main_, I'll say the app.run, like so. Then I'll create a function. Then I'll call this function index. And what this function would do is to return a JSON or return an object which will have a key called tutorial. And the value will be Flask, React, and Heroku, like so. Okay, then I am going to create a file called .env. So I'll go to the terminal, I'll do touch.env. Okay, and inside of this file, what I'm going to do is to put my Flask app to app.py. Then I'll set the Flask env to development. So I'll say Flask env, and I'll set this to development. And we will change this later on to production when we are ready to deploy this to Heroku. Okay? So now, what I'm going to do is to try and run this application, and let's see if it runs. So I'll go to the terminal, I'll clear this, and I'll do Python app.py. And you see it is not working, it is still set to production. So I need to install a package called .env, which will allow Flask to pick the .env file that I just created. So what I'll do is to terminate this, get this package called python.env. So I'll copy this, then go back to the terminal, then I'll do pip install .env. Okay, and now if I do python app.py, as you can see, I am in the development mode. So if I go onto this URL in the browser, it says not found, and that's because I've not specified the root. Okay, so I'll come over here, then I'll say that at app the root, if someone goes to /API, and I'll also set the methods to get, like so. Okay, so now if I should go to /API, like so, I have tutorial, Flask, React, Heroku. So we have the backend ready. The next thing that we are going to do is to create the React front end, connect the React front end to the Flask backend, and then do the Heroku configuration and deploy this to Heroku. To create the front end, what I will do is to go to the Create React App website. I'll copy this, go to the terminal. In here, I'll say nps create React app, my app, like so. Now that this has completed, what I'll do is to go into my app directory, go into source, and inside of app.js, what I'll do is to clear everything in there, okay? Because I do not need it. So I will close this and then wipe out everything that I have in here, okay? So I will clear this and leave just the div for now. The next thing I'll do is that inside of source, I'll create a directory called component. And this component directory will also have another directory called deploy. And inside of this deploy directory, I'll create a new file called deploy.js. I'll import React from React. Then I'll create a constant called deploy, which will be a function that for now will return hello. I just want to start the React application to make sure that it works before I start calling the API in the backend. So I will say return div, and for now I just want hello, and then I will say export this. Okay, I'll go to the app.js file, then I'll import this deploy component. So I'll say that import deploy. I'll import this from components, deploy, and then deploy, like so. The next thing that I'll do is to say that deploy, like so, and then start the application to make sure that it works before I connect the front end to the back end. Okay, so I'll go to the terminal, cd into my app, and inside of my app I'll say npm start. As you can see, I have hello, which means that the React application is working. The next thing I'm going to do is to connect the front end to the back end. I'll do that by going back to VS Code. Then inside of VS Code, in the app.js file, what I'll do is to import useState and useEffect. So I'll say import useState and then useEffect. I import that from React. Then inside of my function, what I'll do is that I'll create a constant called state and then set state, and this will be assigned to useState with an empty object, like so. And then I'll say useEffect, which will take a function, and what this will do is that I'll say fetch, and I want to fetch from /API dot then response. If the response is successful, so if the response, the status is 200, what I would like to do is to return the response JSON. So return response.json, like so. Dot then the data, I just want to console.log the data for now. So I'll say console.log, then I'll pass it the data for now. Okay, just to make sure that I'm actually getting the data that I want before I actually set the state. So I'll say that then if there is an error, what I would like to do is to console.log the error message. Okay, before this can work, I need to set a proxy in the React application so that I do not get a CORS error. Okay, so I'll go into the packet.json, and inside of packet.json, what I'll do is to say proxy, and this proxy will be a URL that I can get from the Flask application. So I'll go to the terminal. I'll activate my virtual environment. So I will say source vmv bin activate, like so. Then I'll say Python app.py. I need this URL, okay? So I'll copy this URL, go back to the package.json file, then paste this over here. Now, if I start the React application, it should log the data, okay? So I'll go to the terminal, I'll do npm start. If I inspect, if I go to console, as you can see, I have the object here saying tutorial Flask React Heroku. So I now know that the front end has been connected successfully to the back end. Now, instead of just logging the data, I will actually set the state to the data. Okay, so I'll go back to Visual Studio Code. Instead of saying console.log data, what I'll say is set state, then I'll pass it data, like so. Then I'll pass a prop to the deploy component. So I'll say prop, and this will be state, okay? Then I can go to the deploy component, extract prop from the props object, and then instead of saying hello, what I will do is now say prop dot, I'll go to the app.py file and it's called tutorial, okay? So it has to be prop.tutorial, like so. So now, if I go back to the browser, as you can see, I've got Flask, React, and Heroku. So we know that now the front end has been connected to the back end. The next step is to deploy this application to Heroku. Let's see how we can do this. Before we actually deploy this to Heroku, if you check your terminal, you will realize that the Flask front end was making a lot of requests to the back end. That's the reason why you're seeing a lot of GET requests. This is because inside of the use effect, we are making a lot of calls. So just add an empty array as a second parameter to use effect. So now, if I start the application, Python app.py, and I start the React application, you would see that you will no longer have a looping request to the /API endpoint. Now that this has been resolved, let's look at how we can deploy our application to Heroku. To do this, I will terminate the Flask server, and inside of the root of the Flask application, what I'm going to do is to install two more dependencies. These dependencies are Flask calls and Greenicorn. So I'll do pip install Flask calls, like so. Make sure that your virtual environment is activated so that you do not pollute your local dependencies. I'll wait for this to install. I'll do pip list to verify that this has been installed. As you can see, I've got Flask calls and I've got Unicorn. The next thing I'm going to do is to pip freeze my dependencies, okay? So I'll do pip freeze and I'll do requirements.txt, like so, okay? So now if I do ls and I do cat requirement.txt, I have all the dependencies that I need for my application. I'll now go into the app.py file. So inside of the app.py file, what I'm now going to do is to import calls and cross origin from Flask calls. So I'll say from Flask calls, import calls, then I'll also import cross origin, like so. The next thing I will do is to provide the static directory or the static folder path to the Flask instance, okay? So I will say static folder, and this static folder will be my app, because my app is the name of my front end, okay? So it will be this name, my app, okay? Because that is the directory. If I go to the terminal and I do ls, I have my app over here, so it will be this my app, okay? So I will say my app, And then the next thing that I need to provide this is the build of the React application. So I'll say build, like so. I will now go to the React application and then run npm run build, okay? So I will cd into my app. Then inside of this place, I'll say npm run build, like so. And this should create automatically a build for the application that I can now deploy. Now, if I go to the application, as you can see, I have something called build over here. Okay, so I'm saying that the Flask instance will take in underscore underscore name underscore. The static directory will be my app slash build, so the path to the build directory which will be created, and then I'll specify the static URL path because I do not need it in this scenario. Okay, if you used the create react command to create your application, you realize that your build is inside of your git ignore file. What you need to do is to comment this one out, else Heroku will not be able to pick it up. Okay, so make sure that you uncomment this one so that you have it available for Heroku to pick it up. So it is now available. The next thing I'm going to do is to add the @cross-origin decorator to the index method. Okay, so I'll say @cross-origin, like so. This is to make sure that I do not get a cross-site forgery request error when I make a request from the front end. Okay, and then what I will do is to say the course will be this, and I'll put in what the app, like so. Okay, you can even remove this because we will not use it anywhere else. That needs to be done is that I'll create another method called serve. So I'll say define a method called serve, and what this method will do is that this method will return send from directory app.static folder. Okay, so it will return app.static folder. So it will return this build, okay, this front end, okay. So it will return this app.static folder, which is the build inside of the React application. And inside of that build over here, I want to return this index.html file. So this file, okay. So I'll come over here, then I will say index.html, like so. And I'll route this to app. The root. If I go to slash, and then I will also specify the cross-origin decorator, like so. The last thing I'll do is to go into my .env file and then change this from development to production so that I do not have debug mode in prod. Okay, this is a simple application, so even if you left it as development, it wouldn't matter. But if you're building a complex application, make sure that you change this to production. Okay, so I've changed this to production. The last thing I'm going to do is to create a proc file for the backend. So I'll go to the terminal, and inside the roots of the Flask application, what I'm going to do is to create something called proc file. So I'll say touch proc file, like so. Inside of this proc file, what I'm going to do is to specify how Unicorn should start the server. Okay, so instead of this proc file, I will specify the web Unicorn, which is the package that we installed, app, because app is the name of my file. Okay, so it's called app.py. So I will say app, and then I'll also specify app, and this app is the name of the instance of the Flask application. Okay, because I said app, which is the instance of the Flask app. If you had this as hello, like so, it would have been app and hello. I hope this makes sense. Okay, so I will change this to app as it is, And that is basically it. Now, I have everything set up. So what I'm going to do is to deploy this to Heroku and then make some changes to the front end as well. Okay, so inside of the root of the application where I've got app.py file, what I'm going to do is to log into Heroku. Now, you can only deploy to Heroku if you have created an account on Heroku. Okay, I have already created an account on Heroku. If you don't know how to create an account on Heroku, what you need to do is to go on Heroku and then you can sign up, okay, and create an account on there. I have already created an account, so I will not be creating an account anymore. Okay, just click on sign up and then follow, put in your name and password to create an account. I've already done that, so I will not be doing that anymore. Once you've created an account, the next thing that you're going to do is to type in Heroku login. So I'll say Heroku login, then press enter. It will take you to this interface and then you can click on login, put in your email and then your password. Once you've logged in, you would see that it would say logged in. Okay, so I've logged in to my Heroku account. The next thing that I'll do is to go back to the terminal. Inside of the root of the application, where I have app.py, what I'm going to do is to say Heroku create, like so. So I've created a repository with this name on Heroku. So if I go onto Heroku, as you can see, I have this name over here. Okay. Now, what I need to do is that inside of this terminal, I will say git init, like so. Now, if I do git status, I have these files that I can now commit onto Heroku and push onto Heroku. Okay, but before I do that, what I need to do is that inside of my app directory, I also have a .git file. Okay, so if I do LA, as you can see, I've got a .git file. I do not want that. I want to only have one git file. Okay, so I'll remove this by saying rm-rf.git, like so. Okay, so this has been removed as well. So now inside of the root of the application, if I do git status, I can do git add dot, okay, and I can say that git commit Flask React Heroku, like so. Then I'll say git push Heroku master. As you can see, I'm having this error, and this is because I should have done git init before creating the repository on Heroku. So what I'm going to do is to go to Heroku, click on this. So I go to settings, then I'll say delete app. Then I'll copy this, then I'll paste this here. Okay, then I'll go back to the terminal and also delete the .git file. Okay, so I'll say rm-rf.git. Okay, so if I do LA, I do not have .git anymore. So now what I'm going to do is to say git init, then I will say Heroku create. Now if I type in git remote-v, I should see this. Okay, so now if I do git push Heroku master, this should go through. So this failed. It failed because this has to be requirements.txt. So I would say mv requirements.txt to requirements.txt, like so. Git add, then git commit, then I'll say git push Heroku master. Now this should work. Now that this has completed, what I'll do is to copy this URL, my app, packet.json, and change this proxy to this. Okay, And now I'll go back into my app directory, ls, then I'll say npm run build, because I've made a change to it. So I need to now build it and create a new build that I can now deploy. So I'll say npm run build. Now that this has completed, I'll go back to the Flask application. So instead of deploy, I'll say git status, git add dot, git commit. I'll give it a name called finish. This has to be -m. And I'll say git push Heroku master, like so. So now, if I go to this URL, then I go to this /API, as you can see, I have tutorial, Flask, React, Heroku. And then if I go here, I have Flask, React, Heroku. This is how you deploy a Flask and React application onto Heroku. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.